My adult stepson moved back in, refused to leave, and shamelessly took advantage of our kindness. But what we discovered, a shocking revelation, taught us a life-changing lesson we never saw coming. My husband and I, both 45 years old, are celebrating 11 years of marriage this year. It hasn't been without challenges, especially when it comes to my stepson, Kyle. When I first met my husband, he was already divorced and had a 15-year-old son. Kyle and I? Let's just say we didn't hit it off. He didn't want his dad marrying me, and who could blame him? The divorce had left deep scars, and I was just another stranger invading his already fragile world. I tried to be patient, to understand his pain, and to create a bridge between us. But Kyle's resentment was palpable, his distance an impenetrable wall. Over the years, I clung to hope that time and effort would soften his heart. My husband and I worked tirelessly in our early 20s to build a business, scrimping and saving to make ends meet. When we finally sold the business, it felt like we'd hit the jackpot of dreams, early retirement and a beautiful seafront home. Life was peaceful, quiet, blissful. Then Kyle turned 18. He left to live with his girlfriend, Emily, in a cushy apartment provided by her wealthy parents. From the outside, it seemed like a fresh start for him. But their days were spent glued to video games, the apartment in shambles, and their rent perpetually overdue. Every few months, Kyle called his dad or mom begging for money. Each time, my husband argued with him, urging him to grow up and take responsibility. This went on for a year, an endless cycle of pleas and arguments. I stayed out of it, biting my tongue even when the stress it caused my husband was undeniable. Then, last December, everything changed. Kyle called to say he and Emily had been kicked out. Her parents, fed up with their laziness, had finally pulled the plug. Emily went to her sister's, leaving Kyle with nowhere to go. My husband asked if Kyle could move in with us. I agreed, thinking it was temporary. We set up a space for him, gave him privacy, and offered support. But weeks turned to months, and it became glaringly obvious that Kyle had no intention of finding a job or leaving. He lounged in his room all day, gaming, contributing nothing. Worse, he started to make my life unbearable, avoiding chores, leaving messes everywhere, and treating me like a live-in maid. I voiced my frustrations, but my husband's conversations with Kyle went nowhere. Kyle's response was always the same: anger, shouting, and slamming doors. The tension was suffocating. 2 months ago, my husband and I left for a weekend trip. When we returned, our once cozy home had turned into a nightmare. Dirty dishes piled high, attracting flies. Laundry littered the floor. Pizza boxes were scattered everywhere. It was chaos. I couldn't believe my eyes. When we confronted Kyle, we found Emily in his room. She had apparently moved in without so much as a word to us. When questioned, Kyle shrugged, saying she'd been kicked out of her sister's place and would be staying here. His indifference was infuriating. Worse, he dismissed my anger at the state of the house, laughing it off and saying, "You're better at cleaning anyway." That night, exhausted and seething, I overheard a conversation between Kyle and Emily. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but what I heard froze me in place. Kyle was laughing, bragging about how he'd turned our home into his personal paradise without lifting a finger. Emily chimed in, claiming credit for the plan, urging him to milk this vacation for as long as possible. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily wasn't just complicit, she was the mastermind behind their audacious freeloading. And Kyle, my stepson, had no remorse. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. They had taken advantage of me, and the sting of frustration and betrayal left me reeling. As I listened to their conversation, a storm of resentment brewed within me. They spoke with such casual audacity about how gullible my husband and I were, shamelessly planning to stay in our home indefinitely. My heart clenched with disbelief. Was this really how they saw me? All this time, I had stayed silent, giving Kyle, my stepson, the space he deserved. I respected him, treated him like family. But now, hearing him reduce me to nothing more than a maid, someone who existed solely to take care of him, shattered something deep inside me. Sleep that night was impossible. I tossed and turned, replaying their words in my head, feeling deceived and utterly taken for granted. That was when I knew I had to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The next morning, my resolve was firm. I began my silent rebellion, refusing to make a fuss but determined to make a point. No more chores. I stopped cleaning up after them, ignored their dirty dishes piling in the sink, and let their laundry remain untouched and scattered across the house. At first, they didn't notice. Their entitled indifference continued until the cracks began to show. Dirty dishes became a mountain, and the scarcity of clean clothes sent them scrambling. When Kyle finally asked if I'd be doing their laundry, I looked him in the eye and calmly said, "I'm not in the mood to work. You'll have to figure it out yourself." My husband, catching on to my plan, stood by my side, refusing to entertain Kyle's complaints. We began having our meals outside, spending as little time as possible at home, letting the mess and inconvenience fester. But I wasn't done. If they thought they could continue taking advantage of us, they were in for a rude awakening. Kyle and Emily were glued to their gaming world, so I decided to shake things up. First, I misplaced crucial gaming accessories, controllers, cables, anything that could throw a wrench in their fun. Picture this, they'd eagerly sit down to play, only to find their gear mysteriously missing. Kyle tore his room apart in frustration, searching for items I'd stashed away. Then I turned up the heat, slow internet, sudden power outages, and the ultimate sabotage, meddling with their saved game progress. Hours of effort would vanish, leaving them fuming. The tension in the house grew thick, almost tangible. I maintained an air of innocence, feigning ignorance while their annoyance reached boiling point. The final straw came when they discovered the fridge empty and the pantry bare. Kyle stormed into the living room, his face a mix of confusion and rage. "Are you starving us on purpose?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Emily, not far behind, chimed in with her complaints. But my husband, always steady, stood firm. "You're right," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "It's time for you to leave." Kyle protested, his voice rising in desperation. "We have nowhere to go." My husband didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. The argument escalated. Kyle turned his ire toward me, hurling insults and calling me useless, blaming me for the chaos. His accusations stung, but I didn't waver. With a steady voice, I reminded him that if he wanted a cleaner house, he should start cleaning it himself. "You're not a child, Kyle. If you want respect, you have to earn it." When Emily tried to defend their behavior, I laid it all out. "I overheard your little plan," I said, watching their faces pale. "You thought you could treat this house like a vacation. Not on my watch." Their stunned silence was all the confirmation I needed to keep going. "This ends now. If you want your gaming equipment back, you will pack up and leave." Their protests grew louder, but I stood my ground. I even warned them, if they didn't leave, I'd take drastic measures, like removing Kyle's bedroom door. My resolve was unshakable, and they knew it. The next day, they begrudgingly began packing. Kyle grumbled about his gaming gear, and Emily shot me icy glares, but I remained firm. As they left, I handed over their equipment, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Kyle's resentful look no longer fazed me. I had done what needed to be done. The house was finally quiet, free from their chaos. My husband and I could breathe again. But the peace didn't last long. A phone call from my husband's ex-wife, Haley, brought new waves of criticism. She scolded us, calling me heartless and accusing me of making Kyle's life miserable. Her words stung, and for a moment, I wondered, had I been too harsh? Was I truly in the wrong? Misunderstandings can twist even the best of intentions into something unrecognizable, can't they? This became painfully clear during dinner with Haley, where tensions filled the room like an unspoken storm. The air seemed heavy as we began addressing the tangled web of misunderstandings surrounding Kyle's eviction. My husband and I took turns, our voices a mix of frustration and determination, recounting the challenges we faced while Kyle lived under our roof. We shared everything, the mounting tension, the endless battles. Kyle had outright refused to contribute to household expenses, leaving us to shoulder the financial burden alone. He wouldn't lift a finger to clean up after himself, expecting me to wait on him like some sort of personal maid. And then there were the relentless requests for money, the arguments that spiraled out of control, and the sheer disregard for the shared space we all called home. As I described this pattern of behavior, my voice betrayed a blend of sadness and exhaustion. We had tried, time and again, to have meaningful conversations with Kyle about his future, urging him to embrace self-sufficiency. But every attempt was met with anger and defiance. It felt like speaking to a wall, unyielding, unresponsive. To our surprise, as we unveiled the reality of our struggles, Haley's expression began to shift. Her initial skepticism gave way to understanding. Slowly, it dawned on her that Kyle's version of events had been far from the truth. Relief washed over me as Haley admitted she hadn't known the full extent of his behavior. She even thanked us for shedding light on the situation. It turned out Kyle had been manipulating the narrative, painting himself as the hapless victim of our supposed mistreatment. I laid it all bare, recounting the chilling moment I overheard Kyle and Emily plotting to exploit our hospitality. The memory was still raw, the smug way Kyle boasted that I'd take care of him like a dedicated maid, and Emily's calculating role as the mastermind behind it all. Haley was aghast. Shocked into silence, she listened intently as I revealed Emily's involvement, her blatant scheming to overstay their welcome. That dinner became a pivotal moment, a chance to clear the air and find common ground. By the end, it was clear that our actions hadn't just been justified, they had been necessary to protect our peace and maintain a harmonious home. Haley, shaken but resolute, asked my husband what could be done next. His response was heartfelt. He expressed love for his son and a willingness to help him find a new place, but only if Kyle showed a commitment to change, starting with finding a job. Haley shared her concerns about Kyle and Emily staying temporarily at a friend's house with no clear plan. After a lengthy discussion, a decision was reached. Haley agreed to take Kyle in for 3 months on the strict condition that he actively search for employment. Once he secured a job, my husband would assist with helping him move into a new place. As we ended the night, there was a fragile sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the turning point Kyle needed. Update 2, a shocking split. 3 weeks after that pivotal dinner, Haley called us with unexpected news. Kyle and Emily had broken up. Apparently, Emily had hooked up with a mutual friend, and after a fiery confrontation, she declared their relationship over. The news hit hard. Despite their shared laziness, we had believed they were a match made in some unconventional heaven. But Emily didn't waste time. She swiftly moved on to another guy and had plans to live with him, leaving Kyle heartbroken and adrift. Haley, ever the compassionate one, offered Kyle a place to stay under the same terms we discussed. Surprisingly, Kyle agreed, finally recognizing the need to straighten out his life. While it's uncertain how long his newfound determination will last, one thing is certain, our doors remain closed to him indefinitely. From what we know of Haley, she's no nonsense. If Kyle doesn't secure a job in 3 months, she won't hesitate to kick him out. As for Emily's betrayal, we can only hope it's the wake-up call Kyle needs to take life seriously. Life for us, meanwhile, has returned to blissful peace. No more waking up to piles of dirty laundry or sinks full of half-eaten food. My husband finally stocks the fridge with his favorite snacks without fear of them vanishing overnight. We're even planning a much-needed getaway to decompress from last month's chaos. Update 3, 6 months of transformation. 6 months later, life has blossomed into the tranquil haven we had once envisioned. Our home is serene, free from the drama that once consumed it. Kyle, after his breakup, moved in with Haley and began adhering to the conditions we set during that fateful dinner. His initial months were tough, filled with failed interviews and moments of frustration, but he persevered. With Haley holding him accountable, he gradually built momentum, eventually landing a job that matched his skills. The progress was slow but steady, and we couldn't be prouder. My husband recently had a heart-to-heart with Kyle about his next steps. It was time for him to transition from Haley's home to a place of his own. Taking the initiative, Kyle found an apartment and invited us over to see it. The gesture touched us deeply. He even cooked dinner as a formal apology for the chaos he had caused. Seeing his humility and maturity brought tears to my eyes. Kyle admitted his mistakes and expressed genuine remorse, which I graciously accepted. Our relationship, once strained to the breaking point, has grown stronger. Open conversations and heartfelt apologies have healed old wounds. Kyle's determination to rebuild trust has been consistent and sincere. Today, our bond is built on respect and goodwill, a far cry from where we started. We're proud of Kyle's growth and excited for the life he's building. It's heartening to witness this transformation, and though the journey hasn't been easy, it's been worth every step. If there's one thing we've learned, it's this: sometimes, even the most broken relationships can be mended with honesty, accountability, and a willingness to change.